All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our Global Law Talks at the Ukrainian Bar Association. And I'm very pleased to have our guest today, Fiona Adams, who is a great friend of ours. She is a partner at Greenberg Traurig in London. And Fiona is an executive vice president, managing shareholder of the London office, and the co-chair of the Global Corporate Practice. And Fiona primarily represents corporate clients, focusing her practice on mergers and acquisitions and other transactional matters. Fiona was awarded the Managing Partner of the Year at the Legal Business Awards in 2023 and a Law Firm Leader of the Year in the area Large Practice at the Women and Diversity in Law Awards 2024 and the Legal Leader of the Year at the Women, Influence and Power UK Awards in 2024. And she is highly recommended with various legal directories. And moreover, Fiona is now, as I mentioned, a vice president, executive vice president of the firm. And as a great leader, she is a great example of achieving enormous success in the legal profession. And I asked Fiona to join us for this discussion so that she could share her career path with us, discuss the challenges and ways to overcome them on her career path as a woman, as a business leader, as a legal leader. And I hope this conversation would be useful to Ukrainian lawyers, both practicing and aspiring students who are considering their legal career at a law firm in general. And I hope if you have questions, you will send them to us and I will be happy to ask them, Fiona. Before we start, I just wanted to say that this conversation is recorded and will be available online afterwards. And we'll try to stick in 45 minutes, maximum 1 hour. So, Fiona, welcome. Thank you so much for finding time to talk to us. Tell us a bit more. How did you get into law? How did you proceed in your career?
Okay, well, firstly, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here to talk to you all this afternoon. And so to answer your question, well, my career in law started over 30 years ago now, so it's things have changed a lot over that period. But when I first started out, I did law at university, and I really chose that subject because I just thought it sounded, an interesting subject, a broad subject. And to be completely honest with you, I really liked the show LA Law, which was on at the time. So it was so I kind of did law, and then from law, I joined a law firm. I mean, actually, at the very beginning, I thought I would do more kind of human rights type law. And then, I ultimately ended up going to a commercial law firm in the City of London. And to be perfectly honest with you, that was mainly because of the way that was set up in London at the time. You could apply 2 years in advance, and the law firm would fund your studying at law school. And I come from a family where, I'm the first in my family to go to university. And so this wasn't a sort of well-trodden path that I was familiar with. So, and having that financial support was very important. So it wasn't, I would say, the most, I wasn't like dead set on it from the outset. I kind of just sort of took one step and followed each step at a time in those early years. But then once I arrived at the law firm in London, I've just sort of followed it through from there.
Was it a difficult change at that time for you to start with a major law firm in London as a commercial lawyer?
Yeah, so in the UK, the way it works, you do a training contract for 2 years, and as part of that training contract, you typically do 4 6-month seats, and you rotate around the different departments, which I do think is a very good system, because when you start at a law firm, you don't really have that good an understanding of what each of the different kind of practice groups do, and you know, how they operate and what that means in practice. So it's a very good broad rounded training that you do for 2 years. And so I enjoyed corporate, and that was where I ended up going. I enjoy corporate because I like the fact that you work on a transaction. It's intense, but it lasts for several months. But I did a seat in litigation where litigation cases often can go on for years and years. And actually, whilst I was a trainee in the litigation department, there was a partner there who was probably in his 50s, and he just finished a case that he started working on when he was a trainee. So that put me off litigation.
Oh, this is amazing. Yeah, I've heard about loan litigation cases, but that's probably
Yeah.
a unique one.
Yeah.
Right. So you joined the corporate department and you started progressing in your career, I suppose, like any other associate. And I suspect that, well, I may be wrong, but were there moments where you had doubts along that career path, whether you should continue
Yeah.
with the law
Yeah.
firm and with law in general?
Yeah, I mean, there were moments. I mean, obviously, with corporate transactional work, that you work very long hours at times. It can be very intense. And when I was an associate, this was obviously before the days of the technology that we all can benefit from today. So you really had, if you were working, you had to be in the office because the technology to kind of do things from home just didn't exist. It was even before the days of mobile phones and the internet when I really first started. And so you'd be in the office till the early hours, late at night, often have to go in at weekends, spend all weekend in the office. And as an associate, on the one hand, I really enjoyed it, and I sort of thrived on those those transactions, being part of a team and achieving something together. But there were definitely times when I wanted to start a family, and how was it going to be able to have a family and do this kind of work? And did I really want to spend all my time working and having to cancel social plans, etc. So there were definitely times during that period when I wondered if I wanted to to carry on, or whether perhaps there might have been an easier option, doing something slightly different. But I did stick with it, and I'm very glad and happy that I did. But it's not an easy road, and it does unfortunately go with the territory, that you do have to balance your time and make sacrifices from time to time. Although I do think the technology makes things easier now, because if you have got young children, and this applies to men and women, I think, if you do have young children, the technology means that you can go home, you can see your kids before they go to bed, and you're able to log on later, and you just have more flexibility about working from different places and at different times, which does make it easier to juggle different responsibilities.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. I remember when I started, and it was still very outdated. A lot of copying, a lot
Yeah.
of things done by hand. And at that time when I started, it was early 2000. It was still we already had internet and we already had laptops. And I remember that it was still remote work was something of a struggle rather
Yeah.
than a routine that we have now. But so when you had your doubts and when it was difficult, did you have any good example at work, someone, a mentor who you would look at and try to copy her approach towards work? Was someone helping you or mentoring you so that you stick and persevere?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think mentors are really important, whether it's a sort of formal mentor arrangement or informal. I think it's so important. And I was very lucky. I had, when I was working in corporate department, so Paul Mayer, who's we've been working together. We still work together now. He's now vice chairman of Greenberg Traurig. When I was a junior lawyer, he he was a sort of a junior partner. So we've sort of spent our whole careers working together. And he's somebody I've always, admired and respected. And, he always made working, it was always very focused on the team and the team being together and making it a kind of an enjoyable experience. And he's been a big supporter of me and my career. So I was very lucky to have him, but there were others as well, along the way. And one thing I would say to junior lawyers, starting out or going through their careers is to seek out mentors and to build relationships with a variety of different people within your organization, because I think those relationships can be so beneficial going forward.
I totally agree with you. Yeah, I think if there is a good mentor like Paul, then definitely you have to learn a lot. And you can ask, I think one of the simple things is to actually approach that mentor and say, I have these concerns. And
Yeah.
to me, people feel that they are unique, their situation is unique. While for someone who is in the managing role, who has had experience, the reality is that this is not unique. I've seen that before, and I know the instruments. So
Exactly.
that brings me to my next question. So in your view, you mentioned already that a woman lawyer in corporate law faces a lot of challenges with transactional work, staying late at night, very hectic, very intense. What other kind of challenges you think there are for women in the legal profession, and how do you navigate these challenges?
Well, I think, things from when I first started compared to now, things have progressed quite a lot. I mean, when I first started out, it would more often than not, I'd go to meetings and I'd be the only woman in the room. And, that can be difficult, especially when you're junior and you're trying to, find your feet. It's almost like a sort of a double challenge, being junior and being the only woman in the room. And thankfully, certainly in the UK at least, that has changed. There are many more women in the profession, and also importantly, our clients as well. So you get a much more diverse group in the room these days, although not always. So I think from my perspective, I always try to approach that to not let it be a big issue and try to play it down in my mind. I think a little bit like what you were just saying, sometimes things can build up in your mind. You think it's a big issue, but actually in practice it doesn't have to be. So I always try to make sure I'm not making an issue where there really isn't one in practice. But as I say, I think, as I say, certainly in the UK, things have changed. But there's still a long way to go. There are many more women in the profession and their clients, but there are still, not as many senior women and decision-making women as there are men. So there's still a bit of a way to go.
No, I absolutely. Let me echo that thought. We, at the Ukrainian Bar Association, participated in the initiative by the IBA to survey women in the legal profession in Ukraine, and look not only at law firms but also at other areas such as government officials and courts and in-house. And Ukraine is actually doing quite well in terms of the balance of gender balance. But we also follow the same trend that is apparently is evident in the world, that the more the more you progress in the career, the less women you see. And in the government roles, in the government sector, there is still bigger proportion of women, even in the senior roles. At the same time, law firms, it's where the problem is. You see in senior roles much less of fewer women getting to the top positions like you managed to achieve. And apparently this trend is across the globe. IBA has not finished that survey yet. There are, I believe, about 15 countries who participated thus far. But we definitely, this is actually, that survey to a certain extent prompted me to arrange this interview, because I feel that we need to talk about this problem, and we need to try to find a solution. And at our law firm, we see that what's happening, usually it's fifth or sixth year of work at the firm, when an associate achieves already a lot, and she already has good standing. She is already managing difficult projects and fairly large teams of people. And that's usually at the time where they are 30, 32, when women find their fiancés, become married, have children, and this is where the majority actually decide to stop with their career. And this is such a challenge for us as a firm, but it's also such a disappointment. And I keep telling younger generations is that they should not give up on
No.
their dreams. There was a reason why they went to law school, and there was a reason why they went to law firm and then progressed through all that career
Yeah.
ladder. What's your take on this? What is happening as a woman? Can you tell us more? What is happening at that stage? Maybe we as men are missing something.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's there's probably a number of different factors. I think, you know, there's and you know, I think probably different cultures have different sort of expectations, but I think there's certainly sort of societal expectation that it's, if one parent is to stay at home and look after the children, it would be the mother. That was certainly the view when I started out. I would say now in the UK there has been a shift. You know, still, you know, by far more women stay at home to look after the children than men do, but I think there are far more equal partnerships now between men and women about childcare and you know, who's going to go home early to pick up the kids or whatever. And I think that's a fantastic development. And I think men, you know, from what I can see, men are you know, really want to be more involved now in families than perhaps they did, or at least they felt they could say, you know, 20, 30 years ago. You know, when I started out, you would never hear any of the male lawyers say, oh, I've got to go home and, you know, look after my kids. Or if they did, everybody would think, you know, they're an absolute hero for, you know, for doing that. But I think now what I see in the, you know, in the sort of the younger generation is both both parents, you know, basically, as I said earlier, being at a much more of an equal partnership, which I think is fantastic. You know, it's fantastic for everybody, including the kids, you know. So I think that's important, and I think it's important for law firms to, you know, to appreciate that and to make sure that the men and the women have a bit of flexibility when they've got young children, and to take that into account. I mean, it's very difficult when you're in private practice. You're a service business, and the clients, you know, always, you know, the client work always comes first. So it can be difficult to balance home demands with work demands. But you know, it is doable, and you know, I think there should be some flexibility to do that. And as I said earlier, I think technology is really very helpful in that respect. But in terms of what happens, you know, later, and why there aren't as many women in the senior roles, I think it is partly from what you said about women sort of stopping work as a result of having children. Although, as I say, I see that less now than used to be the case. But I think there's also, and this is a bit of a generalization, but I think sometimes, it's difficult. Women aren't as good at necessarily pushing themselves forward into the, into the senior roles. So I think that's something. And I think that's something which mentoring, which we talked about earlier, can be really helpful. Mentors, male mentors in organizations can be really helpful in encouraging younger lawyers to be brave and to be ambitious, and not to give up and to keep going.
Can I test, please, with you a few ideas? So, this is a real case that we have right now. We have a very bright associate who already had her child. She spent about half a year, if I'm not mistaken, maybe about 9 months, taking care of the child. She found a nanny finally. That's a challenge. And she is ready to start. And what she's asking, and we agreed, can I work half day instead of a full day? How common is that in London? Would many law firms agree to that?
I can't think of any examples that I've seen of a half day. Sometimes we see like 4 days a week, or 9 days a fortnight, to give a bit of extra flexibility. I haven't seen half day. I suppose it might depend in which practice area you're working, but I suspect that's practically quite difficult to manage. And as I said earlier, being in a service industry, it's quite difficult because our job is to be there for our clients as and when they need us. So it's not that straightforward. Yeah.
In that particular case, she's in corporate practice, but I think we are hoping that we can make that work if she could focus more on advisory elements of the corporate practice rather than transactional. But you are absolutely right. In transactional practice, it's so unpredictable. You may think that you have a call at 3 o'clock, and then the client shifts it to 5 p.m. And you really can't influence that much. Okay, what about this other idea? Working from remotely, from home, for a certain period of time, let's say half a year. Would that be acceptable and common in London and at your firm?
I think that's probably a lot more practical. We do, as a general point of view is that we would like everybody to be in the office as much as possible. We think that's, a positive thing for associates in terms of their development and in terms of just collaboration generally amongst the members of our office. However, having said that, we do have some examples of people who work more remotely for a variety of different reasons, actually. And so, I think at Greenberg Traurig, it's never kind of one size fits all. We are very much kind of open to being flexible where it makes sense to do so. So I think having a period, like almost like a transition period, coming back from maternity leave while you're working from home, should be workable. I would suggest that maybe coming in 1 day a week, or just to build up the sort of the relationships again with people and the new people who will have joined whilst you've been on maternity leave, and just to kind of reconnect with the firm would probably be a good thing.
I totally agree with you. And by the way, do you have some small child rooms where children can play if a mother wants to bring a child with her to work?
No, we don't have that. We are so tight on space in our office that we really don't have room space for that. I think very, very large organizations who have very large, buildings could perhaps do something like that. But in our law firm, we don't have enough space for that.
But otherwise, it's not unheard of in London to have that kind of arrangement for associates.
having a sort of a childcare facility or something
Yeah,
on the
for
side.
employees in general,
I would
yes.
say in London, it's not that common. You know, it's most organisations. You know, the real estate is very expensive in London. It's most people don't have a lot of spare space, so I would say that's not very common. And also, a lot of people don't live right in the centre of London. They live more on the outskirts, so they probably are looking at childcare closer to where they live rather than in
Yeah.
the city.
Makes sense. Well, it's kind of different for Kiev, but yeah, we managed to have a small, it's not a child care in the sense that there is no special employee there who is taking care of children, but there is a safely built room that has a lot of toys and safe materials for children to play and to stay there at least for some time. And I mean,
That's a nice idea. I like that. Yeah.
well, we are testing various options as we as organization are growing older and more of our employees are starting to have children, and we need to cater to their needs
Yeah.
and demands. So we're trying to kind of test and trial,
Yeah.
test and error approach. So, but uh, let me ask you a hard question. So let's say that a woman associate had a baby and decided to go back in one or another format. It's likely that that maternity leave affected her career path and delayed her promotion or partnership prospects. How often does that happen? Is that an issue in London? And how do women react to if that happens to that challenge?
Um, I think like looking back on my own career, I waited until I had become a partner before I had my children. And in my mind, I thought I needed to do that because if I had children whilst I was still an associate, I might never get promoted, that's how I thought. Um, and maybe that was right back then, but that is definitely not the case now. We have multiple examples of associates who've had children and then, you know, quite quickly afterwards been promoted to partner. So I would not say it's you know, it gets in the way of promotion. You know, obviously, I suppose to some extent it might depend on how much time you take out, because in order to be promoted to partner, you know, it's about what experience you've had and your relationships with people in the office and with clients. So, you know, you need to look at it in the round, but I don't think certainly in the UK or in our office, it's certainly not the case that if you have children, then you know it's going to be really difficult to get promoted. That's definitely not the case. You know,
But will
people
it delay?
understand that, but that you know, women are probably going to have children, and that's just part of part of life. It's not an impediment.
But I suppose it will delay at least for 1 year.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, yeah.
And how do women react to that? Let's say they were peers together with another woman or another man, doesn't really matter. They were progressing in their career in parallel, and then one of them decides to have a child, take a maternity leave, maybe even come back to practice in less than a year, but that probably sidetracks her career or delays for at least 1 year. I suspect there could be some emotions because you could look at it that in a sense the organization is kind of demotivating people to have children or god forbid punishing them for having children, but I suspect there could be that kind of thinking.
I suppose if there were sort of two people who were in tandem and then, you know, one gets promoted before the other and the other one who didn't get promoted has been on leave, then, you know, you could draw that conclusion. But I do think that certainly when we make decisions about partnership prospects, we always just look at it on a sort of a business case basis. And so I would hope that anybody who was in that position would kind of understand, and we would obviously, you know, have discussions with that person and, you know, talk about their partnership prospects and, you know, what they needed to do in order to get there. And those are, you know, in an ideal world, those discussions happen, you know, on an ongoing basis. in the years leading up to the point where you think you might, be ready for promotion. And so, yeah, I have to say I haven't actually seen anybody be upset because they feel they should have been promoted and they feel that they were held back because they've taken time off for maternity leave. I think, most people, in our firm, we say it's all about applying common sense and business sense to the decision making, and I would hope that people can see that and understand that.
No, I think that's a very fair conclusion, that you need to have an open discussion about that, based on common sense and business sense, as you just said. So I really like what you said, but I think many people are afraid to raise that question, and organizations should kind of come forward and maybe raise that question in advance instead of just waiting until some emotion arises. So, but
it can be tricky though, I think, as a woman to talk about, plans to have children in advance, because you don't know if it's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and so you might not want. I think people probably feel reticent about raising the subject, because maybe it's not going to happen for another few years, and you don't want to raise the subject too early. It's a tricky one. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I don't suggest that you need to plan that far in advance, but you're definitely talking already about your expected maternity leave, let's say in 2 or 3 months.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And you're already discussing with your partners how you transfer the projects, etc. I think it would be appropriate from one or another side to raise the question, okay, how does that affect my career?
Yeah. I think, as we both just said, having an open discussion about it is by far the best way to approach it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so how do you think you already mentioned a few things, that the legal profession has changed for women a lot. You now have, from what I heard, many more women clients in the room, many more associates and partners who are women also in the room. The technology has changed. What else? Do you see more leadership from women? I suspect yes, because you are in the leadership role. Tell us more about that, please.
Yeah, I think it does make a big difference if there are to have role models, to see that there are other people doing, what you might like to do. And there definitely are way more senior women than there used to be. I think there could still be more, but there are more than there were, which is a good thing. I think role models are important for all sorts of different reasons. And so that's a good thing. And I think conversations at the senior level are different when you've got a mix of men and women having a discussion about things, which is a good thing. So that I think that makes a difference.
Excellent. And so, bringing all of this together, what advice would you give to young generations of women who are just starting their career at law firm?
Yeah, I think I would say, as I kind of mentioned earlier, be brave, be ambitious, and something which I think is really important is be yourself. Don't try to be somebody that you think other people want you to be, but just be true to yourself, and don't be afraid to be who you are. I think that's really important, and I think it's much higher chance of success if you're being, you are being true to yourself. So I think, as I say, I think that's really important. I would say choose your partner wisely. Choose somebody who's going to support your career post, having a family, and be an equal partner in that side of things.
I really like the last one about choosing a partner wisely. I actually had a story to share. We still have time. So we had a very bright associate who actually joined us. That was 12 years ago. not from the first start. She came to us for an interview, and we said, we really like your experience, your approach. Unfortunately, your English needs to be improved. Please come back to us in 1 year. And in most cases, people don't come back. But she did. She came back. She tremendously improved her English, and she joined our firm. She grew very fast, and everyone liked her. Our clients liked her. And she was actually a corporate and antitrust lawyer. And she met her future husband at one of the transactions, he was a finance manager at one of the clients. And a lovely couple, they got married, and they had children. And her husband, and I know him, he's a very nice guy, but he said, look, I need you to stay at home. And we had basically, that was a challenge not only for her, but also for us as an organization, because we were basically trying to keep her in her legal career. I don't want to say fighting for her, but in a sense, it was a struggle. And
yeah.
yeah, and we as a firm lost it. We tried to coming back to her after she left several years later, offering her to come back into maybe an advisory practice that is more predictable in terms of pace. And yet, still, we couldn't persuade her. She eventually moved in-house, but I still have very fond memories of that associate. And I think that we probably could have done something better, but I still struggle to find what. So, choosing your partner wisely, I think that's a great advice, because maybe one of the questions you need to ask your future husband: how will you treat me after we have children? Will you support me in having my career progress?
Yeah.
But we have a question, by the way, and I think that's the right time to raise it. So the question is, have you noticed the influence of Generation Z within your law firm? In your experience, have candidates and their approach to work changed compared to 10, 15 years ago? And do lawyers still tend to maintain a traditional mindset, hardworking, resilient, and committed regardless of conditions?
So I mean, there's a lot of talk in the industry about these different generations, and I think COVID has had a big impact as well on how how people think about the workplace and work, etc. I mean, I do think I mean, it's obviously very different to life when I was an associate compared to life as a junior associate now, as I've already mentioned, primarily to do with technology. And I think so now it's much easier to work remotely, work in a different way. But I do think you do lose a bit of the sort of the camaraderie and the team-based feeling, which to me was a big positive part of my life as an associate. Was we were all in the office together, we were all in it together, and we'd get the deal done, and then we'd all go to the pub together or whatever it might be. And I think when you're working remotely and in a more hybrid way, you lose a bit of that camaraderie, which I think is a shame. However, I do think flexibility is a good thing as well. So it's a balance. I think with younger generation lawyers, there is a bit. I think the younger generation lawyers are much more likely to sort of say, this is what I want. Whereas when I was an associate, I was more like, I was just sort of kind of like grateful to have a job, and would just did whatever needed to be done. It would never have occurred to me to say, well, I want something different. So I think that is a difference, and it can be quite difficult to manage. But equally, it's good for people to stand up for themselves, and for the senior people in an organization to hear and to understand what the younger generation are thinking. So I think my approach to life is, moderation is a good thing. So as long as, you have a balance, and nothing is too far at one end of a spectrum, you're probably going along the right track. If that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. It does make sense. And I think it will take those people who take your advice, it will take their career further if they understand that moderation and balance, it's not only in the discussions with your employer, but it's with clients, it's
Yeah.
with your husband, it's with your neighbor. That approach will probably provide you more success, give you more chance of success rather than being too aggressive and too opinionated. I may add to this. We do see a change in approach, and I think it's a challenge for us as law firms, as law firm leaders, to explain to younger generation why business is run in such a way. And I think some of the older things were wrong, and gratefully, technology has changed a lot of things. We don't need to do really mundane things with the help of associates, but it's the technology. But at the same time, there are things like why a law firm should spend only a certain portion of its time on pro bono work and the rest is client work. And sometimes we get questions that, well, shouldn't we do more? And the answer is, well, we are not an NGO. We are a law firm. We are a
Yeah.
business. And I think younger generation, unfortunately, doesn't get that much of a business education. And this is a discussion for law firms and universities to have practical discussion with young lawyers. But I mean, this is my take. In the meantime, there was another question that I just saw in the chat. So a shorter one. What skills or qualities do you believe will define successful legal professionals in the next decade? That's a hard one. So what
Yeah.
skills and qualities will define successful legal professionals in the next decade?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, that sort of AI comes into all of that. And I think part of that question is also about how is the profession going to change? What does it mean to be a lawyer? Is it going to mean to be a lawyer in 10 years' time? And I definitely think that AI is going to make a difference. But I also think that there is still going to be a need for educated, experienced lawyers to interpret the results of AI. And actually what clients are looking for is the insights and the judgment that comes from experience. I think one of the real challenges for law firms over the next 10 years is going to be so I think you need sort of experienced senior lawyers, but in order to become a senior lawyer, you obviously have to start as a junior lawyer, and modeling what that's going to look like, I think is quite difficult to know exactly how that's going to pan out. But we're going to always, I think, need lawyers, maybe not as many. If AI really takes off and it is good enough to do many of the tasks that more junior lawyers spend a lot of time doing. But as I say, we need junior lawyers because we need junior lawyers to become more experienced senior lawyers. And so I think the focus may shift more towards, instead of sort of document review and perhaps more mundane tasks at the junior end of an associate team, it will shift more into kind of analysis and thinking about strategy more than just kind of pure sort of document related work.
Excellent. I'm jotting down to these thoughts so that we can then have a summary. In the meantime, one more question just came up in the chat. So, is there a piece of advice or a moment of insight you received early on that still resonates with you today, early on in your career?
Yeah. Let me think. It's hard to pinpoint one thing. I tell you, there's one experience I had, which was a negative experience, but which has always stayed with me, and which I kind of feel like I've learned from, which is when I was first promoted to partner, I was instructed by a client who'd moved to another company, and they approached me and said they wanted me to be their kind of, client liaison person. I was a new partner, and I'd be, they thought I'd be enthusiastic, and me and this person got on very well. And so they instructed me, and I then opened, put in the paperwork to open a file at my law firm, and then this other partner came along and basically took over the file and opened it in their name, and kind of tried to elbow me out of the way. And I was so excited to have, brought in a client as a new partner. And I just was so upset and shocked that this partner had done this. And actually, this partner was a woman, which was made it even worse, actually. I just felt like I'd been, punched in the stomach. It was awful. And she, and I've always thought, right, I am never going to be like that. I'm always going to try to encourage, if a younger lawyer brings something in, or feels that they've, kind of achieved something, or they've contributed something to the firm, that should be congratulated and supported and encouraged. And I've just never forgotten how that lawyer made me feel.
Well, yeah, I guess you have to be gracious and share the
exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
What you have, rather than try to
and be generous. Yeah.
One more question. In your view, should large international law firms play an active role in shaping the values and future direction of the legal profession beyond their business interests? If so, in what ways?
Well, I do think at the end of the day, law firms are businesses, and they have to look after their business. They have to look after their employees, tend to employ lots of people. And so, our job is to look after our clients and to look after our employees. But I do think so in the UK, I think, the way in which lawyers are trained at law school, I think, and there have been changes in this as a result of what law firms, have said and have kind of talked to our law society about, to making sure the training is as relevant as it needs to be. So I think, in that way, law firms can make a contribution to how lawyers get trained. And then I suppose the other aspect is, how law firms are regulated, and what are the right principles which should apply to the regulation and the code of conduct, etc., about regulating law firms. And I think it's important for law firms to engage in discussions about that, because all of these things, everything evolves over time. So it's important to have open discussions about, some of these topics.
Excellent. Well, I think we are running out of time, and we are running out of questions. So let me do a quick wrap up of what I learned in our discussion. So early on in the career, mentor is important. So if you can find someone who is a good role model and a pleasant person to speak to, then stick with that person like you did with Paul, and be open and seek advice. That leads to a second conclusion: communicate, seek advice, be open about your worries, but also be prepared that most likely you are not unique. Someone already faced that problem, and there may be a solution, and you just have to ask for it. There are many more now women in the legal profession and in the leadership roles, and these are role models. We should strive to have more of these examples, and this is changing the society and the profession in a very positive way. As you mentioned, be brave and be true to yourself. Choose your partner wisely. Moderation and balance are the good way forward in your career and in life in general. And in terms of the future of the legal profession, the lawyers will stick around, but will probably be more about interpretation and of the results produced by AI, providing insights, strategy, and analysis for the clients. And I would add, for me, more emotional intelligence to add emotional touch and personal experience. And
Yeah, I agree with
finally,
that.
and finally, law firm leadership can be important and should be important in the legal education, in shaping the legal education, and also shaping how law firms are regulated in the future. I think these are really important insights. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you, Fiona, for joining us. I wish you a lot of good luck in your new role, in your future legal career, and please, if you are in Ukraine, stop by. I'm sure members of the Ukrainian Bar Association would be very happy to meet you in person. In the meantime, let's stay in touch. And again, thank you so much for your time.
That's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, colleagues, for joining us. We'll be stopping our broadcast now, and we hope to see you next month for our next interview and webinar.
Yes. Okay.